Whether or not Steel Vengeance is the world's best roller coaster is a question that is asked very frequently among roller coaster enthusiasts. There are many people who absolutely love the airtime and rank it as their favorite roller coaster overall, but other people say the layout is repetitive and don't even rank it in their top 25. In this video, we will be giving our thoughts on the layout and overall ride experience of Rocky Mountain Construction's magnum opus. We'll start off with the actual ride experience. The train rolls out of the station across a transfer track where any non-operating trains will be located. There's a hard 180-degree turn which leads into a couple of bunny hills that don't give any airtime but kind of just lurch you forward in your seat and are a preview for what is to come. You then climb the incredibly loud lift hill. It is just obnoxiously loud thanks to the anti-rollback devices. It has even become a meme in the coaster community. You do get some great views of the park to your right and Lake Erie to your left. After ascending the 205-foot lift hill, the train hauls down a 200-foot, 90-degree drop. It is one of the best first drops we've ever experienced as it is very sustained and powerful. I highly recommend riding Steel Vengeance at least once in the back row for this element alone. In the back, the airtime is just insanely strong for a first drop. There are so many other outstanding elements that the drop kind of gets overshadowed sometimes. The drop leads into a small speed hill that doesn't give much airtime, but it's still better than nothing. The next two elements are the craziest on the ride, the Top Hat and Outer Bank airtime hill. The train flies over both of these massive hills. It is around 5 seconds of sustained ejector airtime. The Top Hat also gives laterals, which make the element even better. The airtime begins on the Top Hat before you even crest, and that's about right where you begin to feel the laterals as well. This is because this hill turns to the right, but is basically completely unbanked. The Outer Banked hill, on the other hand, gives stronger airtime, and the sensation of being flipped on your side a little bit makes it our favorite moment of Steel Vengeance, just barely beating out the Top Hat. These are the top two elements on the attraction in our opinion, with a ridiculously strong and sustained airtime along with a dose of laterals on both elements. So both elements result in riders absolutely being ejected from their seat, but also dangling over to the left side of the car. There's another kick of airtime as you step up into the ride's first inversion, a 540-degree zero-G roll. This element feels like you are rotating forever. The hang time and sensation of rotating so long is a unique feeling, especially because there are some rotational forces. It's not like this is a slow zero-G roll, it just rolls forever. At this point, you are so far off the ground, probably at least 100 feet. Then there's a small wave turn that has some laterals and airtime, but what makes the element so good is how high off the ground you are. The second inversion on the ride is definitely the best, and is the most underrated element of Steel Vengeance. It is a zero-G stall variant that has crazy whip and laterals. The transitions into and out of the element violently throw you out of your seat, and there's also some hang time as well. After the stall, there's a quick step down that gives even more airtime. Even the inversions on this attraction just simply lead to more airtime. Then there's a double up into the mid-course. The first airtime pop is probably the strongest moment of the ride, and you don't expect it to be so strong, even if it's not sustained for long. It is an element that isn't talked about enough. And then you pop into the mid-course, which gives even more airtime to all rows, but more to the front. Honestly, I don't mind the mid-course because of how relentless this ride is, and its really long duration. And the brakes don't usually hit hard, and often not at all. So usually you just fly through the mid-course, which leads to an awesome moment of airtime right after. The drop off the mid-course is just another one of the incredible moments on Steel Vengeance. I will say that this element was a little overhyped. The airtime wasn't as strong as I expected, but it was still a great sustained moment of ejector. But it is another back row element for sure. There are also good head choppers as you dive into the structure under the Top Hat. Next is another double up which delivers ejector airtime but is overshadowed by some of the other elements on the ride. The next element is a very underrated one and is definitely my favorite of the second half. This is the off-axis airtime hill. It gives arguably the strongest airtime on the ride, delivers great laterals, and also has the best head choppers. You feel like your hands are going to slam into the wooden structure around you. This is an extremely underrated element and deserves more praise. It really does feel like you are going to fly out of the car and hit the supports. Then there's an overbanked turn that has some nice laterals. Next is a zero-G roll. It is a basic RMC zero-G roll, but is a really nice contrast to all of the airtime. There are some laterals, whip, and hang time, and the supports flying around you make it so much better. The train flies over two small camelbacks and enters the structure again. Like the rest of the ride, it delivers great airtime. Then you climb up into a wave turn inside of the structure. This is one of my favorite elements of the second half. You get flipped all the way onto your side and thrown into your strain, and being inside the structure adds so much to this element. Right after the wave turn, you rotate to the right into the fourth and final inversion. It is very similar to the 0G roll earlier in the second half, but rotates to the right instead of left. It is a nice change because for the entire second half you've been turning left, and then bang, all of a sudden you're rotating to the right, so it gives some abrupt lateral forces, especially because you're not anticipating it. Next is another wave turn. This one is overbanked, so the airtime is almost upside down. Then you fly into the finale. 5 straight bunny hills that all give strong, but very brief and abrupt ejector airtime. This is the perfect way to end Steel Vengeance. It is a barrage of airtime with absolutely no time to catch your breath. Finally, you pop up into the brakes, ending your incredible ride on Steel Vengeance. There's not a single attraction I can compare this thing to, except maybe Voyage at Holiday World. No other coaster can match the amount and variety of ejector airtime. There's brief moments of airtime, sustained moments of airtime, sideways airtime, and airtime mixed with laterals. But it isn't all about the airtime. There are also 4 really well done inversions, as well as some strong moments of whip and laterals. Unless you're a huge fan of Positive G's exclusively, this ride has it all. And I didn't even mention that it is 75 seconds from first drop to brakes. But even with all of the length, the pacing doesn't suffer at all. You fly through each element and not a single one is a dud. The stats are crazy as well. 200 feet tall, 90-degree drop over a mile of track, making it the 7th longest steel coaster in the world, and 27 seconds of airtime. You are out of your seat for longer than the entire prime ride time of the defunct Top Thrill dragster. Steel Vengeance is in the very back of the park. In fact, it is a mile walk from the front entrance. Once you encounter the attraction, there is a dead end, so you'll have to walk back past Maverick to get to the other rides. It's crazy that 2 of the best roller coasters in the world, arguably 2 top 10 roller coasters in fact, are located across the plaza, less than 200 feet from each other. But it is important to note that these are really the only 2 attractions back there. They are also typically the 2 longest lines in the park by a decent margin. Neither of these attractions are particularly reliable or have good capacity, so I highly recommend trying to hit either one or both of them right away in the morning. In fact, Cedar Point lets guests run in the park, which is rare for an amusement park. If you are visiting with early entry, I'd recommend hitting Raptor, Gatekeeper, or Millennium Force for a lap or 2, then heading to the back to get in line for Steel Vengeance 15 to 20 minutes before it officially opens. Then, with just a little bit of luck, you will have 2 laps on Steel Vengeance down in less than an hour after the park opens. When you're approaching this coaster, it just looks huge. It is a conversion of Mean Streak, which was formerly the tallest wooden coaster in the world. RMC added an extra 40 feet to the lift hill and expanded on other parts of the structure, making it a spectacle to look at. The wooden lattice structure of course looks very intimidating. The whole entrance plaza is really well done and is one of those new entrance plazas we've seen from Cedar Fair over the last half-decade. There's nice landscaping, and the coaster and surrounding buildings fit really well into the western theme of Frontier Town. Frontier Town is basically the only themed area in Cedar Point, and I'd say the park actually did a decent job with it. Plus, they added a massive sign in front of the ride, which looks really cool. You enter the queue through a small shed building, and there's a pathway that leads into the main queue section in the infield of the ride footprint. You can watch pretty much the entire ride because of where the queue is located. The queue basically just winds through the infield of Steel Vengeance's footprint, so that's why the views are so great. It definitely makes the wait more enjoyable. There are a bunch of mist machines and shade tarps in the queue because the wait is usually over an hour long and there is no natural shade. Between the length and unshaded sections, it is one of the hottest waits you'll have at an amusement park. After waiting in the main queue section, you go through a small pathway that leads to the double-sided lockers. There's a no loose article policy on Steel Vengeance, so you'll have to put all of your belongings in the lockers. I really like this locker system. However, if you have a larger bag, you will have to buy a locker outside of the ride. These lockers are only big enough to fit a couple of phones and a hat. I don't really like how the lockers are set up in relation to the line though. The line just dumps into the lockers and you have to double back to them and then walk back to the line. It just results in all kinds of confusion, and overall, it's just not a good setup. Once you put all your things into a locker, you have to go through metal detectors. There are 2 of them, but it doesn't really matter which one you go through. I found that the line really slows down in this section because there are 2 separate lines because of the metal detectors. Then, you climb up a flight of stairs and are filled into the station by a ride attendant. I found that most times they honor row requests. My personal favorite row is the back because of the first drop and the extra whip on the stall, However, you should definitely try the front as well. The front gives a different sensation and slightly different forces on some of the large airtime hills because you sort of get pushed over them, if that makes sense. Steel Vengeance has a fine station. It isn't anything special, but there is some theming. However, this coaster has some of the best station music. In my opinion, it almost rivals Millennium Force's iconic music. It does add a fun ambiance to the station because you know you're already hyped to ride one of the world's greatest roller coasters, but then you add in that music and it makes it even better. This coaster has the second generation swing axle trains from RMC. These trains are starting to grow on me just a little bit. At first, I disliked them because as a person with very long legs, the shin guards were extremely painful. After leaving Cedar Point, I had quite noticeable bruising on my shins, and after getting off Steel Vengeance, I would be in pain while walking around for around 10 minutes or so after every single ride. But eventually, I just tried to forget about it and think about the positives of the trains and restraints. And I think that the lap bar makes you feel really open during the ride. The lap bar is heavy, but it shouldn't come down further on you too much during the ride. This coaster's reliability has been really its only downside since it opened. Unfortunately, RMC had no experience with a 200-foot tall conversion, and Cedar Point asked them to reach that height by adding over 40 feet to the original mean streak. This resulted in an underbuilt support structure in several portions of the ride, but primarily in the area around the lift hill, such as the high wave turn off the ground. As a result, Cedar Point's carpenters would have to do maintenance on Steel Vengeance almost every single day, which would lead to delayed opening times, and the coaster's reliability in general just wasn't quite up to the same level as most of the other coasters in the park. However, RMC came in and did some extra work, and as of the last few seasons, Steel Vengeance will typically open on time with the rest of the park. Is Steel Vengeance really the world's best coaster? Absolutely. Or at least it is the best out of the ones I have ridden. It has everything you could want in a roller coaster. Phenomenal airtime, outstanding inversions, crazy pacing, and it is incredibly long. Unless you're someone who only likes roller coasters with strong positive G's, it has everything you could want in a roller coaster. Phenomenal airtime, outstanding inversions, crazy pacing, and it is incredibly long. Steel Vengeance is the complete package of roller coasters and absolutely deserves all of the praise it gets. I honestly don't understand why people love to hate on it sometimes. I get that not everyone loves airtime, but this ride is more than airtime. I think sometimes people just like to hate on popular things. They want to be different. When people say the layout is repetitive, I look at coasters like Voyage at Holiday World or El Toro at Six Flags Great Adventure. Those coasters arguably have even more repetitive layouts than Steel Vengeance. When I was making the script for our Voyage review, it was almost impossible to describe every single element because they almost feel so similar. I'm not saying you have to love it, but if you call this coaster boring, that's just purposely creating controversy. Everyone should be able to at least appreciate Steel Vengeance for what it is. And that will conclude our review of Steel Vengeance. What do you think of this RMC masterpiece? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.